We are recording.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Okay, so if we were to go to that verse, to most people it look like it's nothing. But we go to the dative case, however, in
Okay,
the Greek,
hold on.
which,
Okay, 1 Corinthians 15:52 when you say that verse, right?
yes.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that you have three prepositions, and it's all dative case. So one is going to provide you the instrument or the means by which something is accomplished. The next one is going to end up being the manner for the dative case, and then the time for the dative case. So basically, three different ways it's working here, based off the noun. The noun has to go by a case. Case dictates how it functions and works in the sentence. So when it says, in an instant, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, the trumpet will sound. Okay, so stop there. The first type of dative we have is time. How's it going to happen? In the twinkling of an eye. So we kind of get that. That's pretty easy. Then the next dative is in the twinkling, which is manner, dative of manner, how it's going to go ahead and kind of function. But then here's the dative you really need to look at, because this actually tells you a lot of stuff. And I'm still working on this, but you can't really fast forward farther than this. So we get to ente escate salpingi. Okay, that is at the last trumpet. Okay, this is what you call a dative of means or instrument. In other words, what this would tell you is quite literally how this is to play out, how this is going to be achieved, which is at the last trumpet. Now, I gotta call Bubba News because right now the news is going crazy. There has been reports of the Feast of Trumpets being recorded live and recording their 100th trumpet blast. Well, in order for this to happen, for us to leave, it's going to be at the last trumpet. So no matter how you look at this, the last trumpet is going to be blown. But when's it on? Rosh Hashanah. So it's normally, and like I said, I don't go for the feast very often, but this is quite extraordinary. So when we go ahead and we get to this use of the dative, it's telling us the way in which the way or manner in which this is kind of unfolding, or how this is going to happen. That means the instrument, which is the trumpet, by the way, by which this must be achieved, which is what? The rapture. So a better rendering of this would be, quite literally, I wrote this down earlier, it could literally mean, I have it in my thing here, sorry. I'll just say it from my perspective.
Oh,
So
take your time, bro. Take your time. I want to get this right.
Yeah, of course. So, because of the way this dative is working, you could almost literally say, by means of the last trumpet blast. Because normally it's just at the sound of the last trumpet, which is right. But the dative, if I were to say by the means of the last trumpet blast, that's more specific. That's the means and the means and the way we escape. So really, the dead in Christ rise first, but seeing how quick all that's going to be, you don't really need to worry about, is this first or this first? It's going to happen in an instant. It's not going to be, dead in Christ rise a month before, and then we go. No. All at the same time, but it's just kind of including the dead as well. But really, to focus on, it would be the means by which this is accomplished, which is what? The trumpet being blasted. Well, because Paul is talking to a Gentile audience, they would have actually known some bit about this already. So this wouldn't really be new to them. They may not be like knee deep, but they know about it. So it wouldn't be anything too new to them. So they would have understood this sort of analogy. But here's the thing. As far as I've seen so far, nobody understands how to interpret the last trumpet. It's easy, but there's always there's always that theological implication, which is, what could this be? What are we looking at that maybe we haven't looked at before? When the simple answer, my personal opinion, Stephen, is that this is the Feast of Trumpets. It's the only way.
So it's not so because a lot of people will say it's it's seventh trumpet of tribulation or whatever.
Yeah, I've heard that before. That's not the case. No.
And
might
I
get
mean,
that.
you're looking at the Greek, right? You're looking at the Greek.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I've heard that argument before where it could be the seventh trumpet. That's not the case. The last trump here would have been, from what I understand, ceremonial. What's the ceremonial thing here that we're talking about? Feast trumpets. So, in other words, if I go to the word, I gotta go find it again. Give me a second. So here's the thing. If I was to go to, oh my gosh. Oh, here it is. The word trumpet, right? So many would go ahead and say, well, this trumpet could be used for, let's say, judgment or some kind of punishment, whatever. Well, this may not be a great amount of evidence to this, but it does help aid in the direction to go. If I would look at that word, which is, again, salpingi, it would end up being typically used for a divine announcement, a battle, a ceremonial, a purpose, whatever. But normally, divine announcement wasn't that divine announcement, right? That we're being called home. So I might tackle that later on, just because I have to look at it again. But at the moment, though, with what I've got, I would just say this, using the dative case, it would reference more of our means of escape, which is a trumpet blast. But at that last trumpet blast, okay, the reason why it's so important, though, Stephen, is because this last trumpet blast, no matter where you look at this, you got to find some place of, oh, here's where I would find this, or here's what this normally would be associated with. Well, what is it normally associated with? Feast of Trumpets. That's the thing.
Okay.
So by him, and get this, eschaté, which is your word for eschatology, who knew? It means last or uttermost. So it means last, but that's where you get your word for end times, where things are kind of coming to that last of days, sort of sphere of things. So just by what it's saying alone, you can pretty much tell, okay, this is pretty much referencing more of that last trumpet. Because if it were referencing that seventh judgment trumpet, whatever it is that you were saying earlier, I can't remember. I'm still tired. But if we're referencing that last trumpet in terms of the tribulation, then already Paul's contradicting himself in 1 Thessalonians 5, where we're not appointed to wrath.
Okay.
So that's why I say, no matter what, it's like, well, okay, if he means that, then he's going to confuse a lot of people. But here's what I'm getting at. I still am checking things out, but from what I've understood, based off the Greek, based off the dative case specifically being used 3 times here, and the way Paul is speaking, it almost sounds like the last trumpet is only done, unless I don't know anything, or unless something is hidden from me that I don't know about. But it sounds like the Feast of Trumpets is the only time the last trumpet is ever blown in the world.
Right?
That's
right.
how it works. Which would mean you have to leave at the Feast of Trumpets. Now, I'm very, very careful when I say that because, again, the AC has got to be revealed first, and the apostasy has to have already been taking place, hence the air subjunctives in 2 Thessalonians 2 through 8. But here's the thing that I noticed. Notice how the Feast of Trumpets and the UN meeting come in the same time.
Yeah.
They're all in the same time, and you can pretty much tell when they blow this thing, that's going to trigger, or you can almost think of it like this. Both events are playing out. As they sign it, that last trumpet blows, boom, you're gone.
Wow.
Yes, correct. Because Stephen, the dative of means tells us in which something is accomplished or happens. How is a rapture accomplished? By the last trump being sounded. You can't really escape or avoid a dative of means or instrument, because that's telling you how something is accomplished. For instance, if I was to go ahead and say, well, Christ's blood is what forgives us of sin by our faith in it. Well, if I go to Romans 2:25, pistuo et auto te hamati, or to hamati, that's all dative case. That's telling me the instrument by which my faith's got to be in. Now, of course, you can kind of play around with the dative case in that verse, but that's one of the ways you could use the instrument or the means of the dative case here, is by using it like that. So it tells you about what something is accomplished or kind of done, right? How something kind of comes to be in this case. So when we look at it here, that's how I would personally view this.
Right.
Because you can't get away from it. If
Yeah.
it wasn't important, Paul wouldn't have said it.
Right.
And he did. So, again, I'm emphasizing this strongly because if I'm correct, and I believe I am, okay, and I got to call Bubba because there's been rumor that the Feast of Trumpets is not being recorded, yet it's supposed to be. Now, the reason I want to call Bubba about this is because the United States and Israel were supposedly out of the peace and safety thing. When I called Bubba, however, he said, no, they are still in it. They want the world to think they're out of it, but no, they are still in it. They're bringing representatives. They're bringing certain people in to represent both countries, so they're still in, and they are still doing the peace and safety. So if that's the case, what could they be hiding here from the public with this Rosh Hashanah? So I want to confirm, make sure. But either way, you can't really avoid it. You can't really go around what this dative case is bringing to the table here. So I would very much, based on this, like I said, if I'm correct with this usage, and like I said, I believe I am, it's just that I'm treading carefully because that means if we don't leave, and again, I'm trying to be careful how I word this, but it almost sounds like it's saying the Feast of Trumpets is that last trump. It makes sense because there's 4 types of trumpets that go off in this ceremony. Okay? In fact, I wrote them down in my phone. So that last trumpet blast is the Tekiah Gedolah, which is the final long blast called the last trump. That's what it is, literally.
Wow.
And so 100 blasts total, and they're often in 4 groups. So the Tekiah is your longest one. That's your announcement. And you have your Shavarim, your 3 shorter blasts. So that's a sobbing cry. Go figure. Then Terura, which is 9 very short blasts, which is your alarm. And then, like I said, your last one, called the Last Trumpet, is the Tekiah Gedolah. So that happens in the Feast of Trumpets holiday. So that's why I say it almost sounds like, and don't quote me on this, but because I'm just looking at this from a perspective of what I've seen, what this verse is communicating to me so far. Okay, so I'm still looking at 2 Thessalonians. Ace's got to be revealed first, and so does the apostasy being, happening as we speak. But it almost sounds like it's saying the rapture happens on the Feast of Trumpets because because using the dative of instrument is how the rapture is accomplished.
Right.
The last trump is very vague. All we know is it pretty much occurs on the Feast of Trumpets.
When are you supposed to? Really... When are you supposed to hear back from Bubba?
I tried calling him earlier. He didn't really answer. He's probably still getting better and all that from the hospital. But I'm gonna try to get back to him later today, see what's up. But when I do, I'm gonna ask him some stuff. And whenever I got my report back to you. But the way it's looking right now is that we have to go home on September 24th or 25th. Because which I'm not saying if as in I don't know, but rhetorically I'm saying if this is the case with the Feast of Trumpets, then if we miss this Feast of Trumpets, you got to wait till next September. Because it's the dative of means or instrument.
Right.
So how is the rapture accomplished? By the last trump on a Rosh Hashanah event. If that is passed up and we don't leave, you got to wait till the next one.
Gotcha.
That's how the verse is sounding to me when I read that.
I know, and that's what makes me nervous about all of this because you've seen my Philip Barnett stuff, and I've texted back and forth with him, and he is still dead set that we're going to see the Psalm 83 war, and I did a study on the Psalm 83 war. And it looks more like, it's not the church's mission, it's tribulation language. And of course, maybe it's somewhere in there that Damascus gets destroyed. So I've got another friend in Austin that, says that Damascus is still here,
Correct.
and so I'm like, but everything is screaming this Feast of Trumpets. And I also saw another prophecy that there's going to be 3 days of darkness leading up to it, and that guy Joshua called it not necessarily a rapture, but an exodus, and there were 3 days of
Yeah.
darkness right before, their exodus or whatever out of Egypt. And so I don't know how much stock I put in that, because that's just someone saying that,
Yeah.
that Yeshua,
Well,
Yeshua said,
correct.
and so I'm real leery on those things, but everything else is screaming this. And I don't know why, back in March or April, Philip Barnett dropped in my lap, and I went up and met him, and he's sending me over prophecies and everything. But look, as for right now, I'm all in for the 23rd and 24th, because man, just everything else. You know what I'm saying? With everything lining up, the 2,550 days, all the biblical things, man, is just right there. And
Yeah.
so I'm hoping, my hope is like a Nineveh thing. God told him that, and then God's going to relent and take us early, rather than waiting, because he told Philip Barnett that, I think 2020, that was 5 years ago. And so I'm hoping for a Jonah, because I know Philip Barnett, there's no doubt he prophesies in part. There's no doubt in my mind, because the things he has said has come to pass with regarding Ukraine and so forth. And so
Yeah.
I'm on the edge of my seat, and I'm right now. I mean, at this point, I wish I'd have never even heard about Philip Barnett, but then again, it also, gives me some solace there, that if this does pass, that, it's either this one or next one. You know what I'm saying? And that's where I'm at with this.
See, and that's what's so confusing about this all, is that I've gone ahead and I've taken a look at different stuff right now, and like I said, when I've approached the Greek on this, unlike you said, or like I said earlier, I'm not somebody who goes to the Feast of Trumpets, and I only say that because, again, a lot of these are hit or misses. But what I found so interesting is that, like I said, you have so many components. One, you have Feast of Trumpets that must be, it's going to be not this week or the next. But then the way it's looking is that it's like, well, okay, something like Joshua comes in, and I got to be honest, I look deeper into Joshua's his story. I don't believe it. I think he may have been used to help show us, hey, it is coming. But I started to get into what he believes, into let me tell you this, okay? He went ahead and he's against OSAS. He does not believe OSAS exists. He didn't say this, but he's implying it based off the way he was talking. But you can almost lose your salvation, or you've never truly believed.
Right.
He's definitely somebody who does not believe any of it.
Right.
Which was a very, very sad thing to hear. Right?
Yeah.
The other thing, too, that I noticed was that he had said that he was approached by God. I'm going to kind of butcher this, but basically he was in front of God with another man. This guy was afraid to go to heaven because he knew if he was going to go, or something to that effect, he's going to die, right? He's going to go to hell. And he said something that really, really, really did not add up with Scripture. This is why I say I'm very careful with what he says, because, again, reading Scripture is what it say. He had said that God was going to judge him, but he wasn't scared. Well, off the bat, number one, God is not going to judge anybody. God will not judge anybody. All judgment is given to the Son. So why wouldn't Jesus be the one getting ready to judge him instead of God?
Well,
God's handed all that over to the Christ. So
yeah, that's why I'm just I'm setting him aside, and just looking at everything else that's and my buddy Jimmy just sent me a video. I hadn't had a chance to look at it, and it's got all the that it's begun or whatever, this with the Jews, and I don't remember exactly what I'll pop you the video over. You can watch it if you won't feel led to, or whatever.
Please do.
But because I mean, like today, I looked at my number of followers on Facebook, and I refreshed the page, and then it said 927. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know.
it's those numbers, man. That it's like, I call them God winks, and
Yeah.
man, it's yeah. But anyway,
Well,
I
and
mean,
all of this, yeah.
but
Well, and in all of this too is to warn, is just to give you a heads up because I know you'd appreciate this. I know
yeah,
you'd like this because most just don't care. But like I said, I'm very very careful about this feast because again, what's the aorist subjunctive say in Greek? Okay, we're going to have the AC revealed first, or sorry, the apostasy first and the AC revealed next. So we got to go by that. But what's so crazy is that these two coincide together. So it's almost like if that's the case, this should be perfect. But again, I don't know.
but
It's
I
just
go
something
back to
that's
what
like,
Lee Brainerd said, when I watched this long video on the apostasy, and I think the apostasy actually is, it's not the church falling away or whatever like that. I think that is when they sign the deal. They make the covenant with death. And where's that at? In Isaiah? They
yeah,
make
it's in Isaiah 28, I think.
yeah, they make their covenant with death. When they sign on the line, that's the apostasy. It's an event. If you go look at that, it's what Lee Brainerd was saying. It's an event that happens. It's not a process. The church, or maybe it's both. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
But
it's very interesting that you should say that because that's, I mean, I believe that. I'm just saying, I'm open to interpretation on that because the apostasy is, oh. Oh, interesting. Okay, well that makes sense because if he's signing a covenant with the many, then that many is Israel, of course. Because who else is going to be? It's going to be the world. No, and so the world is committing apostasy by doing what? Stepping away from what is true. So that makes sense actually. Because then you think about it, the apostasy first, then the Antichrist being revealed. That would work. But again, it's so hard to tell because there are people in the church who commit apostasy every day.
yeah,
Not the falling away from the church, but you know what I mean.
yeah,
But that's a good way of looking at it because I never thought about it like that. But like you probably know, the article is used in the Greek. That kind of, I'm going to butcher this, but to make it really really easy and simple to understand, it kind of transforms that apostasy into something specific.
yeah.
Right? So that's yeah. Wow.
Because there was three different things that they went through, because some think it's the church falling away, and there was, and then the other think that it represents the departure, you know, and they kind of disproved in that long video. I forget where it's at on Soothkeep, but it's this long video that they did that I watched, and it's like they disproved the departure, and they disproved the apostasy of the church falling away, and it just feels like an event and a singularity, or I don't know what term to use. I mean, just pen to paper or something like that. I mean,
It'd be a punctular event because if it's basically, I'm using a verbal aspect there, but basically in the Greek, if you were to go in and take an event, well, the event can't be habitual. It's going to be one time. That's punctular. But what's interesting that you mentioned is that, yeah, I could see where, because I don't believe it's the departure. I thought that for a while. If you go to classical Greek, from what I've understood, you can kind of get away with that. But Christ uses this word when he's talking about divorce. And basically, and if you've been divorced and that person's still alive, realistically speaking, you've committed apostasy because you've walked away, you've departed from what is true.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
That's why I say that's, it's a good way to look at it. It's just so hard because you have all these clues, and the only thing I wish Lee Brainerd would have done was understood the critical text and seen why we disagree a little bit. Because honestly speaking, if you go by the critical text like we discussed earlier, there's not a problem at all. The rapture can happen at any time. There's no anything in the way. It's just an event that happens whenever.
Well, I think Lee Brainerd, if he sees something so specific in there, I think he hesitates to bring it out because he just kind of uses the doctrine of imminency, to, for lack of a better word, to hide behind, so he doesn't come out, pointing at any, specific time window or anything,
Yeah.
and
They're not responsible to do. I agree there.
yeah, and so, and I had an email exchange with him, and it was a bit intense, because there's he's saying, what he's saying is two or three. He did a video with some other guy, and I was like, man, this thing's screaming, man, it's kicking down the door. I mean, the house is on fire, and you're, sitting on the front porch sipping tea. You know what I'm saying? And I'm but then he kind of responded, and then things softened up. With whenever I brought up the the biometrics and everything that's in place with the beast system and other stuff that they never even touched on in the video. And it just it was frustrating. But at the same time, he's being cautious too. I mean,
but here's the thing, though, Stephen, is that you can be cautious. Not you, but him. You can be cautious. But then there's being like, I just don't care. And I have respect for Lee Brainerd because, of course, his work in the Greek. But here's the thing, okay? And maybe you know this, or maybe you don't know this. But my uncle was able to get his hands on that 1948 government computer. And it's amazing because once he got his hand on it, I'm like what you're saying, how the house is burning and it's right in front of him. There was a document released about the credit cards. And literally, and this is back in 48, dude. This is like almost 80 plus-ish years ago. Or maybe less than that. And they literally mentioned how this is going to lead into a digital tattoo. Not a chip, but a digital tattoo. And I'm like, what the crap?
I know. So,
yeah,
and you brought up something just now, that about this Feast of Trumpets. You got the Israel when they're going to turn 80 and they're 77 right now, and so how could it go on another year? There's some very specific things in here, where we don't even need Joshua, to even... but the thing about it is, like I always say, if God said the sky is purple, guess what it'd be? Purple, And so if there's going to be another year, it's all going to make perfect sense. So
correct.
So that's it's frustrating. But that's why I'm just like, you know what? I'm all in for 23 and 24. And if it's not, you know what? I didn't fall away from the faith when it didn't happen in 23. And I thought it was, the Agenda 2030, everything was pointing at Feast of Trumpets and 7 years and everything. And even in 24, I was watching this calendar guy, Rock Island Books, and he kind of mic dropped it there. And I'm thinking, here's this guy. 2 decades, and then he comes out and mic drops it just on the beginning of Daniel's 70th week, not even saying when the rapture is going to be. And so I sailed through, but I was very uncomfortable as we, came up to the feast, because I was like, man, something just doesn't feel right here, And then he put out a video right after Feast of Trumpets, before the Day of Atonement, saying that Day of Atonement will not be, will not herald the beginning of Daniel's 70th week. And I mean, my hat's off to him. Like, of course, everybody jumped on him and everything, and I'm like, you know what? He's doing the best he can. He spent 2 decades in that calendar, and I went back and forth with Repo Man, the timeline guy, and he's like, no, it's going to be 364 days a year. It's static, and I can't remember exactly what else he said, and I'm like, and he said the Essenes, with the Essenes, it's 367. With some other calendar, it's some other number. And I'm like, you know what? Throw the calendars out. The first 3.5 years is 1,260 days, the first part, according to Daniel. You divide that by 3.5, you get 360. The second half, 1,260. And then there's those other days that adds up to the 2,550. But and of course, the 2550 that was given to, I don't know if you watched that guy Michael. He made a video a year ago, and that God had made him his Zerubbabel to carry the signet ring, and then all of a sudden he comes out with let's see, he's the the signet ring that carries forth a message. He was very uncomfortable with that a year ago, and then he's the one that comes out with the 2,550 days, and then all that links up, and and Joshua aside, I don't, I'm because he did say some things. He said, "I saw God face to face." But at the same time, hey, all the disciples, what did Yeshua say to Philip? He said, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father." And Yeshua appeared to them, and all the disciples saw Yeshua physically. So and he's no respecter of persons, and certainly he can appear to anybody he wants to. And so I'm not going to, start throwing a bunch of cold water on Joshua either. I'm just, I just try to take and set it aside, and with you and with the Greek and everything, and man, I just think it's really Yahweh ordained, that you and I were put together, and because
Oh, totally.
I always felt like Lee Brainerd was just kind of too conservative with things, and I'm like, you're seeing the Greek. I can't read the Greek, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. Hey, let me call you back in a bit. I gotta go move a grill.
Okay.
And we'll continue. Okay.
All right, buddy. Hey, thanks a lot. All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.